afternoon, good evening, depending on where you might be joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander. I am, as always, incredibly excited and honored to get to host another Power to Fly Chat and Learn event. Now, before we dive in, I'm very excited to introduce you to our speaker and kind of get in on today's session. But before we do, I just want to go over some really quick housekeeping items. Especially important if maybe this is your first Power to Fly event. If that's the case, then welcome. We're so happy to meet you today. If you're one of our frequent flyers, this will be a little repetitive, so just stick with us. The big thing to know with our events is that we want y'all to feel free to participate. So you can do that in a couple different ways. If you want, please feel free to turn your cameras on. Truly, no need to be Instagram perfect, y'all. We're talking like, 3-day-old messy buns. You've got furry coworkers that are, hanging out in your space. We do not care whether you are joining us from your kitchen table or corner office. So whatever you got going on, please feel free to bring it to us. Now, if you don't want to be on camera, completely understandable, not a problem. You can also participate by typing into the chat. Share any questions you might have for the speaker, maybe comments on what we're talking about. Or if you want us to dive in even deeper, then let us know. That's the way that we can make sure that we bring y'all the value that you look for in events like this. Now, I do want to remind everybody that today's session is being recorded. Now, what that means for you is that you don't have to take notes. You get to sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation that I'm about to have with Mandi McReynolds. And you can always go back and review the recording later on in case there's something amazing that you missed or you want to share it with a friend or a coworker or a relative. Now, you can always head over to our YouTube channel. We're live streaming there right now, and the videos are usually posted within about 5 to 15 minutes-ish of the end of the live stream. But if you want to share this and you want to also check out the full archive of what Power to Fly has to share, everybody will be getting an email from us in about 2 to 4 business days, and that will have a link to where you can rewatch this recording once it goes live on our website. Now, that is also the home of all of our archives, everything that's happened from the beginning of Chat and Learns through now. So you can always, I really recommend you do check out our website for these recordings and stuff, because there's just so many more that you can, take a look at and resources that we are happy to put in your hands. So I very much recommend that you check that out. Now, do know that if you do your camera on and you come off mute during today's session, you will likely show up on the recording. So as long as you don't come off mute, you all should be good to go and not have to worry about whether your bedhead made it onto our live stream or not. Now, if you have questions, like I said, always feel free to post them in the chat. You can send them to everyone. But if you have a question that you'd like me to raise, but you want to be kept anonymous, not a problem, y'all. All you got to do is DM me. You can find my name, Meg Alexander, on the dropdown. I'm happy to ask your question or raise your comment and keep you anonymous. Now, the last thing I want to highlight for y'all is that our speaker today is joining us on behalf of Workiva. Now, obviously, Workiva is a Power to Fly partner. They were founded to transform the way people manage and report business data with various collaborators, data sources, documents, and spreadsheets. Now, today, people all over the world use Workiva to seamlessly orchestrate data among their systems and applications for transparent and trusted connected reporting as well as compliance. Now, if you're interested in working at Workiva, their company page looks like what you're seeing in front of you. I'll be sharing links for all of this in the chat thread as we go. But their company page looks like what you see in front of you. From here, you can learn even more about Workiva. You can dive in on information about their culture and benefits. You can look at events that they've participated on with us. So, recordings of past events that we've hosted. But you can also take a look at and register for events that we have planned in the future with them. So a really, really great resource if you are hoping to interview at Workiva that gives you some really awesome talking points that, might not be inside whatever the most recent Business Insider article was that everybody read. So just a really good pointer there and excellent resources to avail yourself of. You can also, as always, search and apply to jobs right from Power to Fly. You can take a look at what Workiva has open. The other thing that I recommend you don't forget about is the follow network. So top right-hand corner of Workiva's company page on Power to Fly, there's going to be a big pink button that says follow. Clicking that does some really great stuff for you, but it is a really awesome option to utilize if you are actively job seeking and don't really see anything right now that really suits what you're looking for. This enables Power to Fly to let you know when Workiva posts new jobs. So we're going to take some of that load off of you in your job search. I also really recommend that you utilize the follow network function if you are not actively job seeking, but something that you hear about Workiva today sparks your attention. You can use that follow network to also kind of serve as a short list of companies that you might want to check out the next time you are curious and actively seeking whatever your next opportunity might be. So really great way to use those features. If you've got more questions on this, please feel free to write it in the chat. I'm happy to help y'all utilize and navigate powertofly.com to your best benefit. Now, I'm very excited to introduce you to our speaker today. Now, Mandi McReynolds is the Vice President of Global Environmental Social Governance, so ESG. Mandi is an award-winning author with more than 15 years of experience within leading corporate ESG teams. Now, as the Chief Sustainability Officer at Workiva, Mandi helps companies around the world to drive business value and societal impact through transparency, accountability, and innovation. Mandi, I'm really excited to have you on the stage with us today. Is there anything else you think our audience should know about you before we dive in?
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with you today, Meg. I love the intro music. Probably one thing to know is I'm very interactive as we talk together. We've got over 100 plus people on the call, so I might ask a question or two in the chat, but feel free to chime in with your thoughts, like Meg said, and we'll take them as we go. I saw the comment right here, 3 years of teaching experience and now want to change your career to IT. What it's like to be an industry spanner is a wonderful skill. You take a lot of transferable skills. Good example of a comment coming in. If you flip to our next section, I'll make sure to talk about that because I had a deep career industry in education and transferred to the business industry. This was a map of my career, if helpful to those of you thinking about it, like the comment we had in the chat. Worked across institutions of higher ed for 10 years in community engagement, community relations experience. My job, a lot of universities hired me to come in and build from the ground up that development and that department for the university. From there, I started a consulting business as I worked in the office of the president to help different nonprofits, institutions of higher ed, and business in different fundamental areas. And right down the road was a Fortune 500 company called Principal, which was in financial services. And they were looking to hire somebody to reimagine their global foundation and their community relations efforts. And environment, social, and governance reporting and governance fell into that area of responsibility. And I remember walking into the president's office, maybe it was similar to who put it into the chat, that I said, "Oh, this job's open." And someone went, "Oh, you should apply for that. You'd be great." And my response is, "I'll never go corporate." Well, man, was I wrong. I was so wrong. I looked at the job and I looked at what was possible in that industry, and it really aligned with some of my values around doing work that business and society could do together. And so ended up there and spent a wonderful career working there, working for that executive team and the CEO on how they were going to institutionalize environment, social, and governance across their Fortune 500 business. As I was there, I was always looking for technology and innovation that could help people like me do the job differently, looking for new ways that we could pilot and build efficiency and scale our team. Workiva was relaunching their environment, social, and governance product. They had worked in corporate social responsibility reporting for over a decade and financial reporting. And I told my team we'd take any call, like just listen to everybody. Let's hear them out. Let's see who could maybe disrupt this market and build capacity for teams like ours. And we did. And I saw how Workiva could collide both the financial data, the environment, social governance data, and the risk data together, and what that could powerfully do for companies to make strategic decisions, to drive strategy that can impact the world. And that's how I ended up at Workiva doing the job that I do. I tell people I have the greatest job in the world. We run environment, social, and governance for our business. And then I serve as a subject matter expert with our product team. And so we talk about building for customers like ours. They follow our team. We have weekly discovery calls with our team on like how we do different processes and efficiencies we can gain together so that teams can impact the world as it relates to social and environmental efforts of businesses all around the globe. So if you're out there and you're thinking of being an industry spanner and changing careers, it's totally possible. And we'll dig in today a little bit about maybe some things to unpack or some things to look for.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mandy. There's a lot of love in the chat for this slide. I think it's really, really awesome. I love that you lived in Ohio. I'm coming to you from Ohio right now. I
Wonderful.
just realized I forgot to ask that. So y'all, if you are in the chat right now, let us know where you're joining from. I'm coming to you from Toledo, Ohio. It's land that belonged to the Fox, Kickapoo, and Potawatomi tribes in my area. So please feel free, y'all, let us know where you're joining from, or if you know whose land you're on. There we go. Oh, jumping in hot. All right. Florida, Texas, New York, Tennessee, Georgia. Oh my gosh. Ohio. Cincinnati. Yes. Tyler, Texas, Queen Creek, Arizona. Thank y'all for joining us. Oh, I love seeing how far our global audience spreads. Sorry, y'all. Very, very selfish ask here. All right, so we've learned a little bit more about your role within Workiva. Obviously, this role very much aligns with your own values. Do you think that your values developed as a result of this role? Like, do you think you were able to bring more of your personal, like, kind of value structure into the workplace? Or do you think you found your way to this because of what your values were?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and this is kind of a next slide too, that shows a little bit more about who I am and my background. And I think it's really, really important that most of who we are is formed before the age of 12 in psychology. And the rest of how we show up in business and our personal life has to do a lot with the affirmations we get, either positive or negative. And I think it's important to start there when you talk about my values or my background and that aligning with my career. My family is pictured off to the left. This is the Van Hooser family, my maiden name. And you'll notice two things. One, I have a daughter who is 13. So in that junior high, getting ready to enter high school next year phase. She looks a little younger in this photo. And then my brother Ryan, who has Down syndrome, which is both a mental and physical disability. And so my family really grew up a lot around adaptability and around possibility. And that really shaped a big value for me was that things don't have to be fixed. Things could be hard and it could take you several years to overcome them, but you can and you can grow. The mind is a massive, incredibly growing thing. And it also anchored me in a responsibility. My sister and I have to be responsible and honored to be responsible for Rai Guy in our lives. And that means that I'm going to make choices and decisions that is in the best interest of my family and that caretaking responsibility. In 2020, my dad got a rapid form of brain cancer. So while the rest of the world was processing COVID, our family was processing COVID in the cancer wing of a hospital. And he passed away. And I had to really sit down and say, why do I show up on Monday? Like, why do I'm doing this massive job at a huge company that I appreciate and love and has been instrumental in my career. And my dad shared with me that I was about growth of business and growth of people and to be okay with that being my path forward. And that really sparked coming to work at Workiva for me was the idea of working for a growing, scaling company and the idea that I could give capacity back to those that work in my field. It didn't necessarily mean that my mission alignment was there. I'm about transparency and about powering a transparent world. It was about the value of alignment of that idea of what I was doing, and also the opportunity to work globally while still being able to care for my family. So I share that with people is one question around your values and what do you look for. I looked at for a company that would give me a lot of flexibility, knowing that if I chose to move into an executive role, I could have the opportunity to still do the caretaking responsibilities I had for my brother and for my daughter. I'm a podcast lover, book lover. When I talk about the world is not static, I struggled with reading as a kid, high functioning dyslexia, and I had to learn a lot around the speed of doing that. And so that was something where I often say people can continuously grow and can move to different areas. And I think my career showed that industry spanning became very easy for me. A value of high functioning dyslexia is you actually see a bigger map of connections that maybe the rest of the world doesn't see. Well, that allowed me to see a connection of ESG before a lot of executives did, or see other things. And so our lives that have those experiences can also grow. And then I love physical challenges. So you'll see me on the road, out on water rafting, doing a whole bunch of other stuff, because I just find that that's a great way for me to have stress relief, balance in my life, and show up a better spiritual and holistic person. So for me, it was looking again, where are the places that would allow me that opportunity?
I think that's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Sounds like your family and you have been through a very long journey, and really, really appreciate your transparency and sharing that with us. Very that I mean that's a lot to have. That's a lot to handle in like each thing itself, right? You know, one of those situations might be like the story of a family, but then you all are tackling all of these either concurrently or like, you know, stacking them up. So thank you for sharing that. I think it helps all of us, I think, to realize that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes of pretty much everybody that you see, whether you work with them or not. So I very, very much appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you. All right. Now, when you were trying to decide what exactly like motivated you, did you have like a list of things that you thought, or were there, you know, things that you have added to the list over time of like, yeah, this is what motivates me in my daily work?
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of deep reflection. And so, one thing that I share with people is during that season, I really took some time and I reflected deeply, spent a lot of time in the morning and just, looked and spent time in, I'm a spiritual person. So I say spend time in prayer about like what's next. And this next slide was really what I came to, which was this idea that if business and society impacted each other, it's a mirror of each other, then humanity thrives. And that was really the season in my career. That was also the season of my personal life. It was this idea of mutual benefit to both. And so, how do I have dual benefit and what does that look like? And that did mean that you end up choosing then what does that look like in different ways. And so a pro tip that I give for people who are searching for jobs is research, 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 research. Like do your research. It may be that you end up saying no to 8 companies, right? You may end up saying not right now. The day after my dad died, I got a job offer. It wasn't Workiva, it was a different company, major company that was like on my like, oh my gosh, this is the job. And my husband and I sat down and talked to you. He goes, I think be sure you're not running from something, you're running to something. And that is one of the things that I would tell people over and over again is you got to go through the personal deep work to make sure you are running to something. And I see in the chat just many comments of some of you are in different personal situations, similar or different. Everyone's road and path is different. I encourage you in those moments to take the time and pause if you can. And it may mean you're still doing a current job because you got to pay the bills and you got to, put food on the table. But it's okay to pause and to go, okay, what's my line like this? And if you can boil it down to a simple line, then that becomes the filter for as you try to run to something.
I think that's a wonderful way to highlight that. And you're right, there are a bunch of people sharing in the chat, and thank you to all of you for sharing. Y'all, truly, I'm always blown away by how compassionate our audience members are. I don't know why. It always is a happy surprise to me. But thank you to everyone who's sharing. There are a lot of people in the chat. They're asking, how do you have any advice for people who are looking to reevaluate their values as a result of a major loss, like losing a parent? Was there anything that worked well for you, or anything that you did that you wish you hadn't at the time when you were dealing with that major loss?
Yeah, I think it was looking back, I'm thankful for my husband and a wonderful partner who said, don't run to something, run away from run to something. And to be okay to tell people not right now. I think that was something that I had to learn, that I was perfectly fine to tell somebody not right now. Perfectly. There was a wonderful team there at Principal, Beth Wood, who was my boss at the time, who allowed me a lot of space to, move from the foundation to leading ESG for the company and for the board, and created flexibility. And I owe a lot to her for being just a wonderful, wonderful human being during that time of my life. And so the second piece I would say is listen to those who are going to meet you where you are and then help you and cheer for you to that next step. And I would say my partner, my husband, was that way as well as Beth. And what brought me to Workiva was because I had taken the pause and really took the time to say, okay, like this is what I'm about, this statement, and then this is where I go. Some tips for as you look at companies that align to your values. I'm going to share 2 tips. One is on the research side. Because I work environment, social governance, I have the privilege of looking at how companies report on those different areas. So I pulled a lot of the corporate social responsibility reports and ESG reports off the websites. And so I would tell you that that is a really good tip, is to go look for corporate social responsibility, ESG, environment, social governance. That's going to tell you a lot more about the heart of the company. If you want an example, you can look at Workiva's website page, which is workiva.com/sustainability. And you'll get to see our report. We have one that's actually coming out later at the end of July, early August, that you can see a newer version of our report if you want to see the latest, and a data center where you can search it for different things. The second piece that I would say is, how does the business make money? And that's something that oftentimes people will say, I'm in a job, but my career doesn't necessarily align to um, maybe the business or the place. And I'll say, well, how does the company make money? Because that's the purpose of the company, is to make money, to build economic growth, to add job advancement and a return to owners, business stakeholders, whoever that would be. And so if you align to how the company makes money, then that's something that can really spark your value. So, for example, for me, I aligned to the education. Saw somebody talk about education, or education made sense. I was very passionate about economic vitality and security for families. So, financial security was a good step when I moved to financial services. I could get behind that mission. Helping people like myself have transparency and access to data to make decision useful information about people and the environment meant something that I could get behind and be about the things that it takes for that company to make money, whether I'm in a role like I am today or in a different role. And so oftentimes I tell people is, the role fit is one thing, but are you about what the company, why the company exists, and do the hard work to see, how does this company make money? And is that something I can get behind? Because if you can get behind that, it can also spark that passion for you, whatever role you might have there.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a ton of sense. I did not know that I had a passion for for the workplace and for trying to make sure that work lives, like our workplaces, look more like the places that we live. But it wasn't until I found my way to Power to Fly that I realized that. And so it is, as someone who spent a very long time working at any port in a storm, you got to get a job. We don't all live on water and sunshine. It really is completely, the feeling is very different when you work for a company that you believe in the mission, not just, yeah, we want to ship the X amount of widgets or whatever, but like when it's something that you really connect with, it's completely different. It's a very, at least for me, it was a very different feeling. And I want that for everybody. I want everybody to find a place that they are truly happy to say that they work there. Really, really excellent. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about what your career has looked like. Do you think that your career has always been values driven?
I would say it's been values driven, but I think the next slide's really fun. I would say it's been the art of the work that I find value in. I love when things are messy, and this is one of my favorite artists. It is, the one hand side is an artwork of her at the time 2-year-old scribble drawings, and she would take them and then she would turn them into a different picture, build on it a new picture that would come forward. And I always, it's very creative, her different work. And if you ask me her name, I'll blank on it every time. But I was like, this is, when I saw it, I was like, I have to capture this because this is what my life feels like when I show up to it. Any job, any work, any industry. Thinking about, oh, I see the kids love foxes too. So yes, please, please share Savannah with others. Is that's what sparked my interest in a job was, is this something where somebody could come in and really say, how do we pull together all this disparate strategy and information together as a team? And how do we create a beautiful picture that benefits the company and the world? And so, in some cases like Workiva, I'm working on product. In other cases, I'm working on, in education, it was about how do you create community engagement is a differentiation for your company, for both faculty grants and development with the community, to classes, to how our executive team engages with the communities of which we're a part. And so it was taking it all and then kind of bringing the team together and saying, okay, here's the picture we have for the market and for the world and how we serve our stakeholders. So it's been the art of the work. I'm okay being a builder. I knew that about myself. And I see a few questions about values or understanding, aligning the values. One exercise that's helpful is if you have the opportunity to do something like Hogan assessment, Berkman, or DISC. These are assessments that tell you a little bit more about how you work and how you work with others. And from those different assessments over the course of time, Strength Finders is another one, or Myers-Briggs is good, but I think those tend to tell you a little bit deeper about yourself. And it can help you really get to then this part of the value of like, well, what work do you find meaningful and in value that sparks joy that you're allowed to kind of put your energy into? And those assessments were really helpful to me at different points. And then as I worked with a team, I learned things that was really important for me as they had their own values.
Do you think, looking back over, your career journey so far, do you think that you prioritized different values earlier than you might now in your professional journey?
That's such a good question. I would say that the flexibility side for me was just super important given my caretaking responsibilities. And so I think that was something that I value. But then, especially post 2020, it became a uh, higher value and a value of, okay, if I say yes to an opportunity and if I say yes to whatever the next step would be within a team and an executive team, is this a place where that value can be true? Is this a place where that value could be tested? And Workiva has a wonderful, flexible culture. So there were things that I looked at, like FTO, flex time off, PTO, paid time off. There were a lot. What was their group? They had a group that came together that was around caretaking. They had a disabilities Berg. And so there were different pieces of Workivas. I did my research, right? I pulled up the website, I dug in and looked at things where I knew that this could be a place where my values aligned really well. But as I matured in my career, and especially in a topic like environment, social, and governance, you deal with a lot of controversy and you deal with a lot of political controversy. And it was really important to me that the value of dialogue or the value of being able to disagree yet move forward together collaboratively for the benefit of communities and business was important. So when I interviewed with our founder, Marty, our CEO, that was an interview question that I specifically asked was, it's not about when we're going to disagree, if we'll disagree. It's about when. And how are you and I going to handle our disagreements? And what does that really look like? And I think it's, as you have your values, find one really strong anchor question that you can ask in the interview process that isn't a question that somebody can sort of respond fluffily to. So with Marty, I was like, okay, let's unpack how we're going to handle when we disagree about a political stance. So I was very specific, even after he gave his answer, to ask a follow-up question. And the reason for that was because I knew in the job that was going to happen. So we would have to have those kinds of conversations. That's just the nature of my job in general, is dialoguing in the disagreements. But I encourage you, if that's a value that you have, and that's where I would say the value of flexibility was always there. It got amplified. And then as you grow and mature, get even more clearer on the type of question you're going to ask somebody who's your future boss or future executive.
I love that. And that's a really, really good point, right? When we're in the interview phase, you want to be the person that has the answers that they want, right? I don't think I'm alone in there and wanting to like, you want to kick every interview out of the park, even if it's not the end all be all job for you, right? Like everybody wants to feel like they're doing well on these. And I think you're right. It is incredibly important to ask something like that, because otherwise you don't know how this person's going to hold, going to hold this conversation with you. And if it's something that is important to you, like you said, you need to be able to ask these questions without worrying about how someone's going to respond. And so, being able to say, hey, here's the question I have for this. I mean, honestly, it reminds me very much of when you get asked in interviews, like, well, what's a time that you did such and such and how did you handle it, right? They always ask like, well, what was a difficult situation and what did you do to overcome it or something? And so I think it's really interesting that instead of just treating it as a hypothetical, you were like, okay, so how does this actually go? When someone has to say, hey, I don't agree with you for these reasons, what does that actually look like after the fact? Because not everybody discusses things the same way. So I think that's really good. I like that.
And if you feel like there's fluffiness, I always say, I'm going to make a note of that, and can I follow up with you? That's a technique too. If you're pressed on time, because I know in interviewing sometimes it's like you got 30 minutes with the people, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, I'm going to make a note here. I've got my pen. Make it. I want to come back to that if we have time. Or do you have a moment that I could ask you a follow up to that? Never let that moment pass by, because that discernment that you need to make a great decision for you and those you care for in your life, whatever that would be, whoever that would be. It's just important that you have the moment to have that honesty and candor and truthfulness.
Yeah, of course. Respond fluffily it's official. Everybody, that's their new favorite phrase. I'm going to use that
Your word.
all of the time. Oh yeah. Spread it like wildfire, y'all. Mandy said it. All right. So one of the things that we did want to touch on before we keep moving through is that how to communicate this, right? So Dana had asked in the chat, how do you genuinely convey that the values of that company align with yours, and not just saying it to show interest in the company or in the role? So when you were looking at these kinds of things, when you were, like researching Workiva, how did you communicate that in the interview? Was there, a specific way that you said it to really drive that point home that this very much resonated with you? Or do you think it's less about how you say it and more about how you like sprinkle those breadcrumbs throughout the rest of the interview?
So one of the things seance or saying I would say at Workiva is like, leaders own failure and success is owned by the team. And this is where you have the opportunity to showcase your research skills in a really wonderful way. So I had found a leader accepting an award and not talk about themselves. And they just talked, all the credit was like to the team. And I had found a town hall that at the time our CEO, Marty, had given, and he talked about this value. And so in my interview, I had down that question that I was like, I really appreciate, and as a leader, believe wholeheartedly that leaders own failure and success is owned by a team. Saw that in your discussion of the company value, saw it in this reward that somebody taught accepted, and you don't see that. So you've created a really good culture around that. Tell me more about how you drive and protect leaders and from being able to accept failure. And so it was a way that I could take the research that I had and pin that to a question where I wanted to understand that, okay, as a leader, as I come in, because I got a list of 17 lessons I've learned in my job and in my career. Is this a place that I can learn and fail? What does that look like? How do you demonstrate that? And one of them is the verbal acceptance of failure often. And the person gave an example of what that looked like, and that allowed me to kind of think through it. But it's a good way of taking some research that you've done, showcasing the value, add a question that gives you just a little more insight to the company.
I like that. I like the add of like, here's what I've learned and here's what I'm looking at, but also let's make this a question. So it's not just me giving you a book report on the things that I read about your org. I think that's wonderful. Okay. So the next question I wanted to get into, I want to start talking about evaluating our own values. There's certain values that might have more impact or more, a skill set that you could flex for greater impact within an org. So how should we go about identifying which of our values or skills might be that thing that would give us that maximum impact?
I think it's really important that the next slide's one that I actually pull in with our team. It's used from designer research, so UX design, and I have to give credit to that human-centered design philosophy. But when you have moments, it's reflecting on it and saying, what did we get right? What did we get wrong? And how are we going to evolve? So every quarter, there might be a different way that we ask these questions, but every quarter, our own ESG team, we sit down and we say, hey, what did we get right? What did we get wrong? Like the willingness to acknowledge failure. I say, here's the things I definitely got wrong this quarter, which happens every quarter. Mandy doesn't get everything right every quarter. And then how are we going to evolve together so that we can meet our goals and continue to scale and be successful as a team? The same is true to ask these personal questions of yourself in moments of success and moments of failure, or often, because that's going to clarify the values for you. That's really going to help you sit down and say, okay, what did I get right? What did we get wrong? What did I get wrong in this situation? And then how am I going to evolve so that I can live congruently with my values, or live congruently with my value? Or do I need to uphold that value and think about it differently? So I think these are three reflective questions to help us grow with each step. So one thing I learned about myself is I need, we talk about kind of that physical energy, the challenge time, right? Like I need a challenge physically to make physical activity a priority in my life. So if I don't have a challenge in front of me, it's just like it just doesn't happen. It's not hard enough. That's just how I'm wired. That's how my brain's wired. So I looked back and I was like, why was my physical activity? Yes, life was happening with my family in 20, but why in 2021 and 2022 wasn't my physical activity like it normally is? Something I think is important to me being like normal, balanced human being. And I looked at it, I was like, well, I didn't sign up for any challenges. Like, clearly I got it wrong. Like, yes, I walked and did some things, but clearly I didn't, put myself in a situation where I had a challenge in front of me. So how was I going to evolve? Well, then I signed up for 4, challenges, just finished a 72-mile bike ride with my brother-in-law, had accountability with other people that were doing it. It's like, okay, that's what I need in front of me to stay on track. And it's up to me to then do that step, because it's something I need to be successful both personally and professionally. Same is true for that reflective spiritual time in the morning. I'm a much better person. I wake up without an alarm and I wake up early, and I need that time to be very focused. I'm introverted, so I need that for me so that I can do what I'm doing right now, which is talk to all of you and look in the chat and see comments and respond. And so if I value that, then what did I get wrong? Well, a lot of times I let a lot of meetings with Hong Kong or Singapore or whoever like take over that time. And that didn't allow me to show up in the day like I needed to. And so what could I evolve differently? Well, I was using like an AI configuration on my calendar that I just added, that when something gets scheduled over that time, it automatically moves that block for me to another time, so that that technology and tool can help me, and I can prioritize that as a part of my value system to better integrate and show up better today, like refreshed, ready to go and have a conversation like this. So great on a personal note, but also encourage teams to do it together too.
I love that. We do have a question that came out of the chat here, and I think this is a really good one to touch on. Chrissy had asked, what do you do when every company you find isn't aligned with your values and you need income to live? So it becomes a beggars can't be choosers situation. This is a really good point, right? Not everybody, and I don't think I'm alone in this. I was for a very long time in my life not in the position to be able to say, well, I don't really want to work for this org, but I have to have a job. So, this isn't a very real thing. Not everybody is in a resourced enough position. Not everybody has the luxury of that choice. What do you recommend people do if they are faced with this idea of, well, it's not the greatest, but it's what's available?
I value and appreciate the candor of this question. I think it's a good one that we should all ask. And a value can be providing, right? A value can be living, and that is okay. And what I would tell you is looking at every situation in every company. There are some companies that are bad, right? And the hope you work through that and you speak up and you try to work through that together. And one of the slides you'll see is like you stay in peace or you go in joy, but sometimes going in joy takes a while. So you, with your own values, have to say, how am I going to stay in peace as I transition to a state of joy? And that's not easy. So I hear you on all of those components. The other part too is then there's best and better, and that those happen at different points in your career. And best is often when you're ready and a company's ready and a team's ready. And so I tell people, like, we also have to level set our expectation that best doesn't always happen all the time. And you work through that component. The next slide is a question that I like to ask myself, where maybe it's in work or outside of work, where you have opportunity, is I say lead in ambiguity. So when you don't know what's to come next, be okay leading in ambiguity, walking in grace, because maybe that person or that company is growing and they're going through their ugly years, and they're trying to figure awkward, I always say awkward years, right? We all had them. Mine was like middle school. We always have those awkward years, and walk with them in grace. Maybe they're in their awkward middle school years like I was. And then take out your purple marker and say what's possible, and start to make a list of what's possible. Harold and Purple Crayons, one of my favorite stories a colleague gave me a long time. It's like, you draw the world you want. And most people, if you read the book called The Back of the Napkin, they are guys who doodle, and they doodle to help people visually see the work. They'll tell you most of the room you walk into, where literally 50% of the room like cannot create anything from scratch. Like, they're red marker people. They have to actually see something to be able to react to it. And the rest, there's 25% of the room that's like yellow marker people. So like once they have a draft, they can like start to go like that. There's only 25% of the room that will pull out a purple marker like Harold and the purple crayon and say, okay, but I want to draw what could exist, so that the rest of you can react. And when I'm in a situation where I'm like, I don't really like how this is going, I'll ask first, hey, what am I getting wrong? What are we getting right? Maybe there's something that involved that I have the ownership over. Or is this a situation where if I took out my purple marker and I drafted something, or I went first and was the first in a team meeting to do something, or I raised my hand to volunteer for something in maybe one of the employee resource groups or something else, is that going to create a little bit more peace and a little more joy in the day and in the workforce that I hope for? Maybe. And so what I tell people is lead in ambiguity, lead, walk in grace, make sure that you're like aware of the stages and phases that people and companies are in, and then offer to take out the purple marker and say, if I put together a draft, or if I try to lead this meeting, or if I have input, can I, what could be? Because it might help shape the group and the world into the picture you hope with, like Harold and the purple crayon.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing. It's completely reminded me how much I loved this book as a child too. So thank you so much for the nostalgia shot here.
Shout out to my friend JR. He shared it with me. It's like Harold and the purple crayon.
Thanks, JR. All right. So let's say we're in this interview process. What kind of questions would you recommend that we ask employers to make sure that the values that they state are actually put into practice and not just lip service?
Yeah, the next slide is a kind of a good one too. This is one where I think, oh, sorry, I must have skipped it. Oh, it's the next one, my bad. I had the slides out of order. Educate me on or tell me more. So these are two prompts that I really like to use to uncover a little bit more in an interview process, because when we talk about the fluffiness line, this allows you to have somebody give you a little bit more information. And so I tend to say, hey, educate me on You said X, educate me on something, da, 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 tell me more about. I also use this to help me understand things as a new person in the room, or even as somebody who has a team that I work really well with. Sometimes somebody else is the closest to the work. And what I might think is going on, or catch yourself in a biased or assumption you might be making, is sometimes saying, tell me more of, or can you unpack that for me, educate me on where we might be here. Those are things that allow the person closest to the work to give you a lot more information that can maybe ultimately help you as a team make a better decision. And so it works well for interviewing, and it works well when you're trying to understand maybe values, and maybe somebody else's values who are a little bit different than yours. Remember the first slide said a lot of who we are is formed before the age of 12. And then the affirmations we get along the way, positive or negative, is how we show up in the workforce. So it might mean that somebody's showing up a certain way because for most of their career, they've been affirmed by that behavior. And if you pause for a moment and say, well, educate me on, tell me more, unpack where that came from, you'll learn a little bit more about their values and maybe what they value and ways that you can evolve together. In an interview process, it's a great tool to dig a little bit deeper on if something is a true value or not.
I like that. And this question, as always, reminds me to remind all of you, you are interviewing these companies just as much as they are interviewing you. Okay. So when you're asking these questions, don't just listen to the answer. Listen to the tone that they are giving you. If you're asking questions about like, oh yeah, I saw that you have, one ERG and it's for the Black community. That's awesome. Do you have any others? Is this something that y'all do? Like, is this something you're expanding on? Blah, blah, blah. Asking the question is important, but so is listening to the answer. Are they, especially when somebody says no, if you're asking like, hey, do you have like, what kind of supports do you have for working parents? If the answer is they don't have any, that the answer is important, but so is the tone. Are they like, yeah, we actually don't have that, but if it's something you'd be interested in, maybe other people at the company would also be interested. Or are they responding with a tone that makes it clear they really wish you hadn't asked this? Listen to when they're talking about these things. Are they excited that you asked a question that they maybe didn't have an answer to? Or are they like, would really wish you weren't exploring the subject? Listening to those tones and trying to infer what's actually happening are just as important on your end as they are for the company as they're interviewing you. I don't think anybody really loves interviewing. The fact that it's not an extreme sport tells me that it's not really something people enjoy doing. So I think it is really important that, when you're going through these processes, you do them as completely as you can so that you don't have to keep doing them any longer than necessary. So I think it's, really important to remind y'all, like, listen to when you're asking for more explanation and to dive in deeper. Are they explaining it to you, or are they just talking in circles? Are they responding fluffily? Very, very important thing to kind of like dive in on.
I would also add,
Go ahead.
look at when I talk about doing the research, what does the company say publicly? Like what's on their LinkedIn channels? What's on that website? What's on their LinkedIn pages of potentially those that you're interviewing with? And those are some really good tips too around values alignment, but also if they're that transparent, it's still good to ask these questions deeper so you have a deeper understanding and deeper insight. And to just remember, whatever they're transparently saying out there, there's an opportunity for you to see if that's true or not, or aligns to those values or not.
There we go. So that actually leads me into our next question. This person had asked, how can employees hold their employers accountable for their mission and values? I logically don't want to put my role at risk, but I don't see much coherency between what my employer preaches and what they put into action. Could you elaborate on the different ways in which employees can influence that company's trajectory? All right, so let's talk about this. Like, if you are an employee and you're trying to hold your employer accountable for these kinds of things, what is the best way to approach this?
Yeah, so I think this builds really nicely on this educate me more, tell me more about. I always want to start there so that I'm not walking into a situation with assumptions. And it may be that there's information that I won't receive at that time because it could potentially put a company at risk or whatever it would be because of my job position. Maybe I'm not open to that information. I'll go back to that slide 11. We talked about this idea of peace and joy. I really like Cy Wakeman's work. She's an incredible researcher, community, really about employee engagement. I encourage everybody to look up her TED Talk. She's on a mission to eliminate drama in the workforce and high accountability. So huge. I saw, Cincinnati and some Texas. She's from the Midwest too. So I saw some of those names earlier, states earlier. And she talks about this option that we have control over. My mom used to always say, the only person that can control your attitude is you, right? Like my mama said, like that is it. So I have two choices, and it is to have peace or joy in the environment and situation I'm in. Environments can influence behavior, and it can be something that influences us. Remember the positive or negative affirmations we just talked about? However, I am the one that's in control of my own disposition and attitude. So when dealing with incongruent values of what an employer is preaching or teaching, I have to choose one that I'm in a space where I can enter that conversation in peace and I can stay in peace in that employer. Or will I need to move on in joy over the course of time? And so those are the two things that are our two options. And with peace, I think it comes back to I try, first of all, to go to that person, not putting it out on a Slack channel in front of everybody, right? Like that's not the way I choose to approach something. Can I go to that person in a one-on-one meeting and just say, hey, I have some questions and I would love to put some time together that we could talk through some topics. Do we have 30 minutes together for a virtual call or phone call, or if you can be in person? And then really then sit down and say, I'm seeing this and I'm here. And then this is what we say about our values. I'd love to understand what is your perspective. And I would love to understand there. And I always come at a position of there's probably things I don't know or I'm not seeing. So could you educate me on or tell me more about? And try in that one-on-one situation to have some more of those discussions, because you may find that then you receive a little bit more information. One of the ways that you can then approach that at the end is I always say, and I always want to be accountable for my own actions. Is there a place where you see that I am not living these values? And you're owning your own accountability to have peace and joy in the workplace that you work in. I'll go first and say, I haven't always upheld whatever the value is. And we all are human and we all make mistakes. And I want to have grace for that. But I'm seeing this and this. So what can I do better? And what can we do better? One of the best communication negotiation people I know used to say, if you, then I, then we. And I think when you're trying to talk through an issue of values alignment, that's a really good tool to say, if you and I want peace together in the workforce on this, and we want to live this value, how might we together work on this? Mm-hmm. Or I hear you saying X, I'm going to do Y so that we can uphold this value together. And it's really important that one, you are the author of your joy and peace on those components. And two, every negotiation, every upholding value is if you, then I, then we. It is never one-sided. It's the values of a company or an organization are held by all of us.
Nice. I'm loving absolutely all of this. We have a little over 5 minutes left. I want to get to one more question, and then we're going to have to start wrapping things up. What is your favorite quality to see in leadership? And what value sets do you think can help each of us to transition more quickly into a leadership role?
I think we talk about transparency a lot at Workiva because that's our mission, right? We're powering a transparent world. And there is a line of transparency that I think is really important so that people can make decisions quickly. And I would say transparency to failure is probably one of the values of Workiva that I have come to really embrace as a leader. and really feel like I can live fully in that. I write down every job that I have, like what are lessons learned. I have sitting in my desk like 17 lessons that I've learned from my career. Um, and with Workiva, I think that's a part where I would say there is how you own failure is one part of it. But the second part is that part of like, how are you going to evolve? How are you going to get better? How are you going to lead or communicate or do things differently? Staying in that iterative state. And I would say that high accountability matched with transparency is what makes leaders catapult to that next level. And so you can't have transparency without accountability, and you can't have accountability without transparency. And that would be my advice, is even that tip of like, if you then I then we, right? Or those kinds of things. Always make sure you're walking in very transparently and being the first to own accountability for yourself, own accountability of a failure, and then what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next to take it? And I think there's some great admiration for leaders who do that.
Yes, 100% there. Okay. Now, one of the things that I want to make sure we dive in on before we end today's session, we want to look a little bit deeper at Workiva and talk about, some of the things that you have shared with us about the culture there. So the word that you used to describe the culture is rocket ship. Could you explain more on this?
Sure, and I'll be fast since I thought these were short, so I'll get like super, super quick. It's a growing, scaling tech company. We're a public company. We're in the small to mid cap range, depending how an analyst looks at us. And so, always growing, always taking market, and we move incredibly fast. And I think rocket ship is kind of a emoji that people use around the company. We have T-shirts for the rocket ship, and what I thought about today was like, we are a fast moving, take it off to the moon kind of culture. And I love that.
Absolutely love it. All right. What's your favorite part about working at Workiva?
Humanity is at the center of all we do. We are an employee first, employee value culture. If you take care of and leaders will say, if you take care of the employees, they'll take care of the customers and they'll take care of the shareholders. And that's the order. And so for me, being a great place to work and that value of allowing employees to do great work and what we can do to set them up to do great work, both for themselves and our customers, is right at the heart of what we do.
Very, very cool. All right. Last but not least, we shared this earlier. Obviously, research is your top tip for someone who's interviewing. I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball. What is some of the weirdest thing your research has ever turned up?
Oh gosh, that is a curveball. I would say what's interesting and all the juice about Workiva is like it was such a happy, positive culture or helpful culture, and that like came out and like all these things. And I remember interviewing and then like even being here my first 90 days was like, okay, at what point do people stop like using emojis or like smiling all the time? And and you kind of keep
Does the like
waiting.
customer service voice end? Like
Yeah,
you're
like you're
waiting for
waiting
it.
for this to stop and it doesn't stop. And so I think that was one of the funniest things I found was like, oh, like the green ooze is legit. Like you all like bleed your zesty green, like I'm wearing today. So I think that was a surprise. And those of us that are new that have got moved from other cultures that maybe weren't as employee first, we're all sitting around a table one day. We're like, you just keep waiting. And then it's like a year later, you're like, no, it's like legit. It's the real deal.
Amazing. Absolutely love to hear it. Mandi, I just want to say big, big thank you. This has been wonderful to get to spend the last hour with you. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. I really hope we get to do this again soon.
Likewise, Meg, and thank you everyone for your participation in the chat. And for those of you that are on your journey and some who are facing some challenges in your journey, I'll say the valleys are always green at the top of the mountain. So just keep trucking through that valley and keep working on those values for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so I'm sharing a link in the chat thread here to where you can check out Workiva's company page on powertofly.com. Obviously, there are some really great resources as well on the website. I love putting on these events for each of you. It's really awesome to see the participation that we get from our attendees. So thank you so much. It really makes these events so much more impactful. I hope that you are proud of yourself for spending an hour doing something that is good for yourself and your career. You should all pat yourselves on the back for that. And a big thank you for showing up and showing out for today's event as well. If this has been your first event with Power to Fly, I hope it will not be your last. And no matter how long it takes until you join us again, I hope you have a safe, happy, and healthy rest of your day, week, weekend, whatever. That's going to be it for us today, but thank you so much for joining us. I cannot wait to see you on another Power to Fly event soon. Have a nice night, y'all. Bye.
Put it all together, ain't nothing better. I'm gonna do what I do. I feel marvelous, glorious, feel so amazing how I do. Here I go.